continue talking about money, because when the energy crisis began in October 2021, the typical bill for heating a 2 or 3 bedroom home for up to 3 people was £1,200. Now it's more like £2,000. It's rises in costs like that which drives so many people into what's called fuel poverty. Being in fuel poverty is defined as having to spend more than 10% of your income on keeping your home adequately warm. According to figures from the charity National Energy Action, 3 million households in England are expected to remain in fuel poverty by 2030. That's because the government looks set to miss a legally binding target on upgrading the energy efficiency of homes. According to the NEA, it would take an investment of £18 billion to bring energy-poor homes up to spec by the end of the decade. So joining me now is Pat Coomber-Wood, the Chief Executive of Citizen Vice in North Oxfordshire. Thank you for joining us this morning. Pat, what are you seeing in terms of people struggling with their bills?
We are just seeing a growing number of people struggling with bills. It's quite shocking. We released some reports recently about the fact that nearly 5 million people are struggling with energy debt as well as other debts, and most of those people are in a deficit budget, so they've got more money going out than coming in, despite many of them actually being people in employment.
So it's getting worse for them. They're drowning under it, effectively.
Getting much worse.
God, they must feel terrible about it.
It's very, very difficult, and especially because for many of them there isn't a way out of the situation that they're in. We're finding it much harder to find solutions to the problems that many people are in. And the groups that seem to be affected at the moment we're seeing are, of course, people from low-income households, and it could be where they've got parents who are in employment but have children, where maybe a mortgage has skyrocketed recently or rents have gone up, single parents with young children, pensioners who are in rented accommodation, and then of course also people with long-term health conditions and disabilities.
Pensioners get help with the winter fuel allowance, don't they?
Many do, but there are also eligibility criteria around that, so it's it's not necessarily a given that everybody will get help with that.
And I mean, North Oxfordshire, no two ways about it, it's an affluent area. I mean, I'm sure there are pockets of poverty, there are everywhere, but if you're seeing problems, it's got to be bad in all sorts of places, hasn't it?
It's significantly bad, and what's even harder is before we tended to find that people were in specific areas of deprivation, whereas now it's scattergun. It's really? People everywhere. It's rural, it's urban. We're seeing people from all walks of life who are really struggling to make ends meet.
How does fuel fit into that budget? Because you're painting a picture here of really tight for everything, and I mean, are they having to cut back on essentials in order to pay those fuel bills?
We're very worried that people are actually cutting back on essentials to a degree that's actually very bad for their health. So we are seeing many people being moved onto prepayment meters, and then they can't afford to top up the meter, and yet they still have to pay their standing charge. So they have to pay over £300 a year for the standing charge, even if they don't use energy at all, and where they're just, if they're trying to put money into it, it just covers the debt that's already on it.
Yeah.
Wasn't
there a pause at one time when people weren't going to be moved on to the prepayment meters?
That's correct. It was paused, but it's beginning to start again because of this tremendous debt that people have to energy companies. And of course, part of the problem as well is that when people get handed over for essential debt like council tax or energy debt or rent arrears or mortgage, it tends to go to enforcement agencies that are quite aggressive in collecting that outstanding debt, which usually has additional charges for those people who are already in poverty.
And are these public bodies, I mean, the fuel companies, I suppose, have some responsibility. Well, they do, they're legislated as well. But, I mean, do you find that the way they deal with people is what you'd expect or hope for?
It's very sad that they don't seem to reach out to people and speak to people. The onus is on the person to contact the company, and it's often very difficult to do that.
Yes.
We've done a lot of work trying to help people get hardship allowances through energy companies, because many of them do offer that hardship scheme, but often the criteria are impossible for people. So if you're in a deficit budget, you can't get one, because very often they'll require you to pay 3 months, and then they'll release you from other outstanding debt, or they require that you can show that you are able to have, say, £50 of disposable income every month. And if you're in a deficit budget, you can't do that.
Jessica, I mean, this government has put a lot of money into supporting people with fuel bills, haven't they?
They have, but it has not been enough, as we've seen. I mean, we're looking at shocking levels of people who are experiencing fuel poverty. I knock on doors all day in Bournemouth, and I met somebody the other day who's retired, caring for her elderly mother, and her energy bills are £500 a month. How on earth she's meant to pay that, I'm not sure.
Well, she's probably turning down the dial as well, in a way which is good.
And so what's missing from this picture is, one, regulation of the retail energy market, which is, we saw lots of companies go bust last year, which forced people into tariffs with different companies.
Well, it was all fixed tariff in the end.
Well,
there was that standing charge that Pat talks about.
The standing charge, yes, and actually I've helped people with this problem where they didn't realise they had the standing charge and have come to me with thousands of pounds of debt saying, I don't know where this has come from. The second thing is, we have some of the leakiest homes in Europe, and there hasn't been enough money put into insulating and bringing up the energy efficiency standards of home. And the third thing is, we are still too reliant on expensive energy forms.
Yeah, I think the Labour Party's estimate was about 28 million, wasn't it, to sort out the insulation problems? You're not
to sort out the insulation problems. So at the heart of our plans for economic growth,
which included, I would have thought, insulating houses.
It does, and it remains part of the programme. We have a really ambitious programme to get to clean energy by 2030. Our entire economic strategy is underpinned by the Green Prosperity Plan, which is about investing in the industries of the future, investing in the energy forms of the future.
Would it make it cheaper?
It would, absolutely. I mean, the idea of investing in renewable energies is entirely to bring the cost of our energy bills down, create jobs in the industry.
It depends on the world energy prices, doesn't it? You can't just bring it down in this country.
But if we have homegrown energy, homegrown renewable energy, we are not reliant on the vagaries of the international energy market.
It's going to make it cheaper for us. Do you think so, Caroline?
Well, I think we're doing things very differently. We're trying to be much more practical. People have got an immediate issue. We have a huge retrofit programme on our council properties and dwellings, investing millions.
If you're lucky enough to have one of those council houses.
Yes, and obviously many people who are in those lower income brackets are some of our tenants, and they are responding in huge numbers. We're running at pace to actually put in loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, things that then make a difference so that people can run their homes more cheaply. We're only building homes that are to the right EPC level now, so that they have a guarantee that their cost of running those homes will be cheaper. And a council that actually has looked after its money over many, many years. We have council tax funds to help people who are behind on that.
You're looking at Pat all the time. You're looking to the people who...
We're working with organisations like Pat.
Do they sound like the sort of things which you'd like to see long term? Or do you think we've just got to get past the crisis?
It's very tricky, because I think the reality is, at this moment in time, people who are experiencing the worst poverty are paying the highest for everything. For their energy, because they're having to use more energy to heat poorly insulated homes, particularly if they're private renters in the private sector. Fortunately, a while ago we got rid of the additional charge that you had on prepayment meters, because there was a huge campaign by advice agencies. Because if you're on a prepayment meter, you paid more per unit of energy, and poorer people were...
You'd like to see the standing charge go as well,
That was wrong.
I would love to see the standing charge
Why,
go.
is it just confusing? I mean...
Well, again, the standing charge, if your income is the lowest and you're paying the same amount as somebody who's on the highest income for the standing charge, that seems grossly unfair. And it would be better if people paid for the energy they used, because even if you're not using energy, if you don't switch the lights on and you don't use any energy in your house at all, you still have to pay £300 a year.
Yeah, and it makes a difference. Thanks for coming and telling us about what's actually going on there. Still to come on today's